on a big scale, I think small and rural libraries are the same as large libraries, except we do the same stuff. We have the same services, we have the same kind of things. We do it with fewer people and less expertise, honestly. So what you need to know about rural libraries is really that you have such few staff and that you're doing so many different things. Like, we were just joking around, right? So when I worked here at this library, I did payroll, maintenance, sidewalk, circ, marketing, youth, collection development, all of it. I was the cataloger and the tech person, I did technical services and technology. I did, make posters. All of that is one person's job. There isn't as much, I think in a larger library, there's the marketing department and the cataloging department and the, this department and the technology folks, and it's all separate. And so there's 115 libraries in Colorado. 63 of them are in towns with under 10,000 people. 44 of those are under 5,000 people. The average amount of staff in a library under 10,000 is 3.2. The average amount of staff in a library under 5,000 is 2.3. So that's what that is one director who's probably full-time, and one other staff person that's probably full-time or 3/4 time, and then one or two really quarter-time people, and then your team of volunteers, and you probably have 2 or 3 good volunteers that are just there out of the kindness of their hearts. We used to have the cover girls, cover ladies, and they would do all the book covering, put all the plastic on the books, and we couldn't roll a book out without our volunteers, so it's that kind of stuff that you need to know, that you don't get to have, the tech people will do that. You have to learn that, you have to do that, and that's awesome. And it's another thing you have to learn. An HR department, that's you too, right? You're the HR department, so you have to know the HR rules and do all the hiring and do all that. And and the cataloging, well, that's probably you too. That might be one of your part-time people. Get somebody to do, but collection development, that's you. Because that involves spending some of the money, that's definitely you. So all of those skills, if you like all of the skills that you're learning in library school, then rural libraries are for you, because you'll get to do them all. And if you have this one thing you really like, probably that's not going to happen in a rural library. You'll get to do it sometimes, along with all the other stuff. So, grant writing, that's you. Right now, Tabby's back there, the director of this library. We just walked through with the technology. She's going to try to find a grant, because technology in rural libraries, all of the computers in here are running Windows 7. None of them are running Windows 10. She needs to upgrade, right? That's on her. The tech part of it's on her. The funding is on her. All of that. On a national level, so I was part of the Association for Rural and Small Libraries. Our data on a national level, directors of small and rural libraries get paid around $23,000 a year for full-time work. I have to say, New Mexico and Oklahoma bring that average down when you look at the data. In Colorado, it's around $33,000. So it really depends on the state you're in. But we're about mid, but the national average, $23,000 for doing everything. And cost of living's different in a small town, Buying a house in Florence is a lot more affordable than buying a house in Denver, by a lot. So there's that, cost of gas is still a cost of gas, cost of a gallon of milk is still a cost of a gallon of milk, but, housing, not so bad. It's funny, I was talking to somebody who works in a Denver system, and we were talking about technology, and I told a story about a woman who came in here when I worked here. And she was an older lady, and one of the person working the circ desk came back to get me. I was in the back room, and they were like, she has a computer question. And I was like, okay. And I got there and she was like clutching her computer bag. And I thought, well, you know, it isn't that she couldn't figure out the password because she hasn't even gotten it out of the bag yet. You know, like, wonder what the tech question is. And she had never used a computer before. And her friend had sent her the laptop and she just brought it to the library. And when I was talking to the person in Denver, they were like, we would never have the time for that. You know, because we worked out with the staff how to help her, and like half hour here, half hour there. She came 3 times a week, something like that, until, you know, I watched her send her first email to the friend that had sent her the computer. You know, and she had never typed. Like, she didn't want to touch the thing. She had all sorts of like fear about it. But we got to help her. Where in a bigger library, it would have been like, you can come back, there's a class, there might be 20 people in that, you know, we have one every month. You know, it would have been different. It's not that they wouldn't have wanted to help her. It's that they wouldn't have had time because there's so many more people. And here you get to know folks and you get to know more about what they need and what they want and what you can do. And they get to know more about you. So in smaller towns, libraries are definitely anchor institutes. Right? It might be the only place in town that you can get internet without having to buy something. Like, there is a coffee shop in town. It's not a Starbucks, you know. If you go in there, you're expected to buy something. It's like, so it's a third space that has free internet. I live outside of town here, and I do have internet, but I'm off the grid, and I have the best internet I can purchase. You know, and a lot of people out where I live don't have any internet and wouldn't know why they would. You know, I do a lot of tech stuff and I do it from my home, so it makes sense that I would do that. But most folks, they can't afford internet, or they literally can't get internet. Like, there's no lines going out into the mountains. They're coming to the library. The library has internet, it has a place to sit. Like, it's more of a community center. So when you think about what you're doing when you work in a rural library, is you're becoming more of involved in the community. Not that big libraries aren't at all, but you take on a different role. You're maybe the same size fish, but you're in a smaller pond. So you stand out a little more on the services that you can provide. I like to think of small rural libraries as like little speedboats, and bigger libraries as big cruise ships. And I think we can be a lot more agile and make turns a lot quicker. We're not going to have a committee with a white paper forming on whether we're going to make a change. It's going to be a completely different thing. Because we're smaller, we can move faster, we can do big change quicker on things that we've decided about. The average amount of staff in a small and rural library in Colorado, in a town under 5,000 people, is 2.3. Mm-hmm. You know, it's hard enough to have a meeting where you're all in the building at the same time, because if you're open, you're probably not all of you are working at the same time. So it's hard enough to have a meeting where everybody's there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no committees. So the average budget of a library in a town under 5,000 is about $230,000 is the average. And that's nationwide, but in Colorado, it's about the same. And that's paying for payroll, that's healthcare, that's books, that's programming, that's, you know, snacks at story time. That's the whole enchilada, all of it, the rent, the building, whatever it is. And mostly it's paid through mill levies, so a percentage of people's property tax. Some are city funded, some are city libraries, most are library districts in Colorado. That's not true on a national level. It's true in Colorado. Every state has their own like mix of how libraries are funded or how that rolls out. And what that means is this library is directly responsible to their taxpayers. They say over half of the libraries in the United States are in small and rural areas. So, I mean, there's something to it. Like, there's a lot more opportunity. I think it's hard sometimes to find jobs in urban areas in libraries. It's not hard in necessarily in a rural area. There's jobs posted on the Association for Rural and Small Libraries listserv all the time. There's a job thing on the website. They're looking for directors in small towns all the time. And they don't necessarily require an MLS. Some of them do. Some states require different certifications if there isn't an MLS, and others don't. There's a couple states that require that you pass a test if you don't have an MLS, and others that don't. There is a very complex formula that the IMLS has developed about rural, and it has to do. Rural is different than small. They have broken out rural and small, and rural it has to do with how many miles you are from an urban center, and they have said that an urban center can be as few as 5,000 people, which is not an urban center, but it's all about proximity to certain services. So if it's small, you're anywhere less than 20,000 or 25 or 20,000 people. So to me, that's huge. So I think, where's the nearest town around here that's 20,000 people? Well, you're going to end up in Pueblo, closest one, and that's much more than 20,000. It's like 100,000, but that's a good hour away. So that proximity makes us rural here. The population makes us small. So you could be a town out in Iowa with, a population of 30, 35, 40,000 people, but because the nearest service is so far away, or the urban center is so far away, if you're a good 30 miles, 40 miles from an urban center, then you're considered rural. And then you're a small and rural library, even if you're large. It gets a little confusing. There are some grants that are only for rural libraries, there's some grants that are only for small libraries, and there's some grants that are only for rural and small libraries, and there's some grants that are for rural or small libraries. So you have to kind of know what subset you are, or combination they're in. The Association for Rural and Small Libraries is the only association in the country for small and rural libraries, and they say you define yourself. If you consider yourself small and rural, you're small and rural. There's a couple other large governmental organizations that define small and rural. The census is one of them. Health is another one. So they all have their own definitions of what small and rural is. So there isn't a unified federal definition. So you kind of have to wing it when you're doing a lot of stuff, deciding. But yeah, I think anybody under 10,000 is certainly small. And in Colorado, it's probably rural. So in Florence, there's no big box stores. If you want to see an iPad, you can see one on TV or you can see one over the internet, but you're not going to be able to touch one unless somebody owns one and they're willing to let you play with it. But there's no store where you can go buy that kind of thing. So you have to go travel to see that. Does every home in Florence have internet? Why would they? It's something you have to purchase. We often pay higher rates because those companies are trying to get back that cost for that final mile. So you pay a higher rate for a slower speed than in many metro areas. To get 10 megabytes download at my house, so I live out in the mountains, like I said, I live in a rural area, I live where they're off the grid. I have internet shot by Wi-Fi 13 miles line of sight to my roof line from the town Penrose. The best I can buy is 10. I don't think I actually get that by the time it gets to me, but whatever. And I'm paying $70 a month, and that's the best I can get. I mean, I think we had VHS long after most of the metro libraries had gone DVD, for sure. It's funny, I just read this report from the IMLS that shows rural and small libraries are doing more programming than most urban libraries. And there's been an increase in the last, without the numbers in front of me, I'm bad at this, but something like 5 years, there's been an increase of 63 some odd percent, 60 some percent, in the amount of programs that are being held in rural and small libraries. So I think, and again, I think that talks about, how we're involving our communities and how we're here for people. I think everybody, any librarian in any place, always wants the best for other people. Like, I think that's part of what we do, right? And I think it's a little more direct when you live in a small town because there's less buffers. There's fewer people and fewer staff. It's just closer, That's
all I got.
All right, cool. That's all I got.